When you're in When you're an insurance producer, you're going to deal with people at multiple levels in the organization, and you need to talk to each of them differently, whether it's the office manager or the CFO or the CEO. And so in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down for you how you deal with each level of the organization so you can navigate the insurance process and make the sale. Let's get into it. All right, the first person that you deal with a lot is the office manager. And the office manager is tricky because they'll make it sound like they have a lot of power. And they might think that they have a lot of influence over the decision because they process paperwork, they collect the certificates, they talk to the agency all the time. But in reality, their job is more in a processing role. They don't make decisions about the relationship. So you have to be very careful when you are contacted by an office manager. A lot of times, what it'll sound like is you'll get a call and they'll say, "Hey, Jim wants me to call and get quotes. So I've got a packet of information that I want to send you. What's your email address?" And what you have to understand in this situation is that you have absolutely no buy in from the decision maker to actually buy the product. You have to be respectful of the office manager. They have a job to do, and their job is to insulate the CEO or the actual decision maker and facilitate the process. However, they are not going to be the ones to actually approve the product. Now, here's the trick in this situation. What they want is to make life easier for the decision maker. The decision maker thinks that they are making the process smoother by handling logistics. But what you and I know as producers is that if the CEO is not bought in on the change, they're not going to make it. And actually, they're not going to get what they want out of the process. So you have to respect the office manager. You have to navigate the process appropriately, but you have to speak to them and say, look, this is what you're going to need to do in order to actually get what you want out of the process. Office managers tend to be very detail oriented. They tend to be very focused on the transactions. They are focused on the service because they are the people that have to call our staff and deal with them all the time. However, they are not the people that make the decisions about the relationship and the strategic direction of the organization. And in order to make the sale, that's the person you actually have to get to. The next level up from the office manager is the business manager or the CFO, depending on the size of organization that you're dealing with. This person has more of a strategic level focus, and every organization is going to be a little bit different about how much decision making influence they have over the insurance. A lot of it's going to come down to the personality of the CEO. Some CEOs are very visionary, they're relationship oriented. They really don't like getting involved in finances and operations. And so they delegate a lot of those decisions to another person. You have to try and feel that out in the organization. Does it seem like they have a partnership at the highest level where the CEO handles visionary tasks and the CFO handles operations and finance? If you get the sense of that, and the CFO is saying, look, last time we made this type of change, it never went to the CEO, you may be dealing with the actual decision maker. A good way to suss that out is to ask the CFO the last time you made this type of evaluation, who all had to get involved. If they've never gone through that process, you got to be careful. They may not know what the actual decision making process will look like. In that situation, you may encourage them. Go talk to the CEO, ask them what they want to do. You're not being a pain if you do that. What you're doing is you're making their life easier because nobody likes the exercise of quoting. Nobody likes the exercise of interviewing brokers for no good reason. Everybody is looking for the fastest way to get the job done. And if the CFO doesn't know how the organization is going to manage that process, encouraging them to feel that out is really in their best interest as much as it is in your best interest. Now, as a personality type, CFOs tend to be numbers driven, they tend to be detail oriented. And when you're interacting with them, you need to be specific, you need to be accurate. You should not round, you should not go with ballparks. You should be accurate and on point and take your time when interacting with them. They didn't get to be CFOs by rounding and approximating. You have to be specific when you're interacting with them. They are typically thinker personalities. So if you've watched my video about the different personality types, that's the type of individual you're typically dealing with. Now, sometimes it can be a blend of thinker and facilitator or thinker and persuader. It's not always straightforward. They are just one personality type with one way that they interact with people. But the thing is, if a big part of your job is balancing a budget, details are important, and it's very likely that that's going to be a big part of how they function as a person. At the very top of the organization, the executive, what you'll find is that these people tend to be pragmatics or maybe persuaders. So what this means is very frequently they are fact-based, they go quickly, they don't want to get down into the details of the product. They are more focused on strategic relationships. So many times, what they're trying to do when they're interacting with you and strategic partnerships is they're going to, in 30 minutes, make a decision on whether you're the right type of person to do business with. And then they want to pass down logistics to people underneath of them, which means what you need to talk about are the high level business impacts with these people. From an insurance perspective, usually that means they don't want to talk about coverages. They don't want to talk about the nuances of policy language. They may or may not even care about how quickly certificates come out. What they do want to understand is the business impact of working with you and your organization. That's what's going to move the needle for them. So if you have certain risk management services, or if you have a certain level of expertise that can demonstrate you are better than your competition from a competency level, that's more what moves the needle at the executive level. They tend to be more visionary people. They tend to be focused on relationships, which means that's how they're going to be wired, not so much on the details. So if we're stacking this out in the organization, you got the executive focused on relationships and working with the correct partners. You got the CFO that's kind of a blend, and then you got the office manager that is really in the weeds and in the details. You have to respect the decision-making process for all of these people because they can all shoot you down if they don't like you, but you have to speak to them at each of their levels. Now, if you're working with a lot of nonprofits, you may also work with board members, and board members are even a step further above executives typically, where they are really focused on relationships. Now, every situation is different, and what I find to be helpful when talking to a board member is ask them the question, hey, what's your background? You may find that they were an accountant. You may find that they were a lawyer. You may find that they were a school teacher, and each of those people is going to bring their personal experience to the insurance evaluation process. You should speak to them accordingly. For the most part, though, board members are there to advise the executive, to evaluate the executive, and provide counsel. So if you're talking to a lawyer, they're going to have a very lawyerly bent, but a lot of them are going to be business people with business relationships that have been in this type of decision-making process before. They're going to be strategically focused with the tint of their own professional background. So when you're dealing with them, make sure you figure out where they're coming from so that you can speak to them at their level, but also keep in mind they're going to be strategically relationship focused, which once again, you're coming back to business impact, unless you get the sense that they are there to supplement the CFO or the office manager. Sometimes in smaller organizations, people will say, oh, that guy used to sell life insurance. They probably know something about property and liability insurance too. Get them in the mix. If that's what they're there for, go into the details with them. However, a lot of times the board member is really there to be strategic counsel for the executive level of the organization. Now, all that said, sometimes you get into an organization and you're dealing with the interim CFO or the interim executive director. Never trust the interim. Anytime you see interim, that means the organization has not decided that they are the correct person to lead the organization yet. This is very important because if that interim thinks that they have decision making power, they may tell you that they have decision making power, but they actually have no ability to make a decision. And in this situation, they may string you along a lot for an extended period of time and actually have no ability to make a decision. So if you see interim in the beginning of their title, tread very carefully. You're probably not dealing with the decision maker. So look, those are the different levels of the organization. They use these playbooks that'll help you navigate through the sales process and speak to the person appropriately so that you're speaking the things that they need to hear so that they can feel comfortable with you so that they can approve you. And keep in mind, the office manager, the business manager, CFO, the executive, the board member, they can all shoot you down at any given time. So you have to persuade all of them, but all of them need to hear something slightly different and are going to have a different viewpoint on the insurance buying process. Hey, look, if this was helpful, please hit like and subscribe. It helps other people like you find the content. If you have questions or you've experienced this in your personal life, please drop a comment. As always, thank you so much for watching, and please go build something great.